Good morning, dear friends. Welcome to the Northern Virginia Baha'i Center Sunday morning program. Please note that the program is being recorded and it will be made available on the Nova Baha'i Center website through YouTube. At this time, we'd like to remind everyone that you're muted to reduce the audio feedback, but we invite you to enable your camera so that the speaker can see you. You can enable your camera by moving your mouse to the lower part of your screen and clicking on the video camera icon. We'd also like to remind you that public messages in the chat box will be visible on the recording. At this time, we'll begin the program with prayers and devotions.
Behold a candle, how it gives its light. It weeps its life away, drop by drop, to give its flame. You must die to the world, and so be born again, and enter to the kingdom of heaven. Look at me, follow me, be as I am. Abdul-Baha, Abdul-Baha. You are the angels, if your feet be firm, be steadfast as a rock that no earthly storm can move. And as you have faith, so shall your powers be. And know that till the end, I'm always with you. Look at me, follow me, be as I am. Abdul-Baha, Abdul-Baha. Love mankind, follow me, be as I am. Abdul-Baha, Abdul-Baha. And how I long to travel the world in utmost poverty and cry out, Ya Baha, God willing you may do this for me. Teach the cause, follow me, be as I am. Abdul-Baha, Abdul-Baha. Serve mankind, follow me, be as I am. Abdul-Baha, Abdul-Baha. Look at me, follow me, be as I am. Abdul-Baha, Abdul-Baha, Abdul-Baha.
Uh, we are having, okay.
Bangkitlah, wahai manusia, dan dengan kekuatan Tuhan berazamlah untuk mendapatkan kemenangan ke atas dirimu sendiri. Agar seluruh bumi dapat dibebaskan dan disucikan dari pengabdiannya kepada dewa-dewa. Hayalannya yang kosong.
Our speaker this morning is Dr. Ghasem Bayat. We are expecting his talk to take up most of our allotted time. However, he will be back next week with part 2. Because the talk is going to run the full hour and 15 minutes, we've asked you to please type your comments and observations in the chat box. Dr. Ghasem Bayat's topic today is how to walk in the footsteps of Abdul-Baha. Dr. Bayat has been a student of world religions and their respective scriptures, the history of nations and cultures, and in particular, the Baha'i Faith. He has authored many articles in Baha'i publications and regularly presents on various aspects of the Baha'i Faith on radio and TV programs. For 7 years, he presented the teachings of the Baha'i Faith as solutions to world challenges and religious issues at a live televised interfaith dialogue at Yaran program of Pars TV. Over the past 2 years and another weekly TV program in the Court of History, he is presenting the Baha'i teachings as solutions to the past and present cultural and religious shortcomings of the Muslim world. Dr. Bayat and his wife, Dr. Sateh Bayat, live in Sugar Land, Texas. Please welcome Dr. Ghasem Bayat. Dr. Bayat, I believe you might be muted.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm very grateful for your introduction. I say good morning to all those wonderful individuals who have taken their Sunday morning to be with us. As you said, my talk is on the subject of how to emulate Abdul-Baha, how to follow in his footsteps. And I'm grateful for the devotional that particularly was making that very same point. With your permission, I will start sharing my screen and move with the presentation I have prepared for you for this morning. I want to make sure that you are able to see my screen. Is that correct?
Yes.
Very good. So this topic, I called it look at me, follow me, be as I am. And the question to us is, how can we become like Abdul-Baha? And the theme of this subject today for my presentation is to hear the long-standing plight of the African Americans in our midst. My presentation will include a very brief history of slavery in North America, because it's very hard to talk about 400 years of slavery, almost 200 of it in the form of slavery and 200 of it, the consequences of that. So it's going to be very brief presentation. Although slavery ended, but unfortunately the racial prejudices, which are the consequences of 200 years of looking at the African Americans as slaves, still persist in our society, in certain parts of our society. I'm going to share with you some statistics of life and work over the past recent years of African Americans, to emphasize that still we have remnants of that kind of thinking in some quarters in our society. And the hope is that following this presentation, we become a lot more conscious of it and do our best to eradicate them in our thoughts and minds. Then I'll briefly talk about the Baha'i teachings on the subject of racial prejudices, and bring up this very important point that unity in the world, based on Baha'i writings, is dependent on unity with the African Americans. That is, as long as we have this old wound still there and those cultural traits still persist, we cannot have world unity. And I also will talk about what is expected of Baha'is, whites as well as African Americans, to resolve these issues and move forward, and conclude with the fact that Baha'u'llah and Abdul-Baha loved African Americans. Often we talk about our family. The immediate reaction is, this is my family. Although it's 40 years old, those two young individuals that you see there, now they are adults with their own families. But the whole point of showing you this is to say that truly, this is not my family. My family is this. The true family of mine, based on my understanding of the thinking of a Baha'i, is this: the people of the world. Baha'u'llah states, O children of men, know ye not why we created you all from the same dust, that no one should exalt himself over the other. Looking at that picture, if anything but absolute equality of all the races and people that appears like that, which is just a small section of the world. If you think any differently, we have a lot of work to do with ourselves. So starting with the theme of how to be like Abdul-Baha. This is, for example, what Abdul-Baha stated, and you see it in the memoirs of 9 years in Akka by Dr. Yunus Khan Afrukhte. It's available in English. Rays of sunlight, the heat of the sun, or the falling rain of divine bounty are bestowed unconditionally and without any ulterior motive. In the same manner, a Baha'i must be the manifestation of divine generosity and charity without any condition or intent. Therefore, we are really talking about that unconditional love and unconditional attention to everybody else to become more like Abdul-Baha. Nothing more beautifully can demonstrate the purpose of looking at the section of our society and fruitful fruit trees side by side, and remember the words of Baha'u'llah, the author of the Baha'i Faith. You can read that in the gleanings of Baha'u'llah, gleanings of the writings of Baha'u'llah. He said, "O well-beloved ones, the tabernacle of unity hath been raised. Regard ye not one another as strangers. Ye are the fruits of one tree and the leaves of one branch." So when we begin to think of ourselves as just a member of the human society and see everybody else in that light, we have made a great deal of progress in thinking the same as Abdul-Baha wanted us to do and follow in his footsteps. Abdul-Baha writes that Baha'u'llah said that the various races of humankind lend a composite harmony and beauty of color to the whole. Let all associate, therefore, in this great human garden, even as flowers grow and blend together side by side without discord or disagreement between them. This passage from Abdul-Baha and Baha'u'llah really gives us the spirit of the way we should look at the world. As Baha'is, we are not colorblind. We actually enjoy the diversity of color. And the diversity of color of the human race on earth, we see it as a human garden. And how much more beautiful it has become with all these variations of the appearance of human beings on earth. Just look at these two branches that birds of different color occupy. Isn't that beautiful? Isn't that the way we should look at the world and the diversity of human family on it? Let's listen to the plight of the long-suffering African Americans with all our heart and mind and acquaint ourselves well with their history of pain, so that we as American Baha'is may become part of the solution to this old age problem and not unknowingly say or do things that adds fuel to this fire. There is this beautiful poem in Persian that I couldn't dare translating it, but I give you the gist of it. He says, "If you're not my sweetheart, how come you're hurting me? If you're not with me, why aren't you? If you're not a balm to my wounds, why are you pouring salt over my injured heart?" It's a poetry, cannot be translated as such, but it explains well what I intended by the passage that I read to you before. That sometimes out of not knowing, we could do things or say things that could be very harmful and very hurtful to people who have suffered so much. And in this context, our beloved African Americans. We're going to have a quick look at the history of America and the history of slavery. The prehistory of the Americas begin
Someone is sharing their screen. I believe that's cut off, Dr. Bayat.
That is correct. So let's see if I can bring mine back again. I appreciate, friends, if at this time do not share the screen. Yes. So I was saying that the prehistory of the Americas begin with people migrating to these areas from Asia. I think I have the same problem.
Okay, we see you, but we don't see your screen. I think you need to share your screen again,
I
Dr.
share it
Bayat.
again. That's all right. That's
Okay.
all right. The migration of people from Asia to these lands began long ago during the height of the Ice Age. But although historically there has been people of European descent as early as 1,000 years ago or so, particularly from Iceland, coming here. But really, we're looking at the voyage of Christopher Columbus in 1492 as the one that started the migration of Europeans to this land. And the most popular theory is that between 17,000 to 40,000 years ago, there were people moving from Asia across the Bering land, which had been opened up because of the regression of the water level and the Ice Age into Americas. And these people were extremely successful in building very advanced civilizations like the Mayans, Incas, Aztecs, and etc. However, these civilizations and these governing people basically lost their power and their holding by the end of the 16th century as a result of the Spanish conquest of Americas, and particularly, unfortunately, because of the disease that they brought with them to these lands that were not common amongst the ordinary people here, and many of them died. Large-scale migration of Europeans to North America really started after Christopher Columbus, around 1600 AD. And as a result, several large colonies in Florida, Virginia, New York, and Louisiana were formed. But increased tensions and contentions amongst the colonies and with the British government, who had claim over these colonies and these lands, brought a war with the British for independence. And eventually, these 13 colonies reached independence from the British in 1783 and formed the United States of America. Here you see the Mayflower that brought many Europeans to this land in Boston Harbor. And also you see a picture drawing of General George Washington in the course of his struggle with the British. Slavery itself, of course, is as old as the civilization, and has been more about power than race in the old age. Slavery has been practiced on a large scale in countries surrounding the Mediterranean Sea, the Greeks, the Romans, people in the Mesopotamia, Egypt, in Asiatic lands, and so on. Therefore, it's not a new phenomenon. And slavery, of course, is as old as history. But the institutionalized industrial slavery on a large scale, never been practiced before, started in the United States. Slavery in North America starts in 1619 when a Dutch slave ship delivered 20 enslaved Africans to Jamestown colony of Virginia. This eventually resulted in the expansion of slave ownership across all colonies. It is estimated that in the 18th century alone, 6 to 7 million slaves were brought to North America. After independence from Great Britain in 1783, slavery was also legally recognized in these 13 colonies. However, the rapid expansion of the cotton farming in the southern states of America flourished the slavery trade, and slavery encouraged more and more slavery in those states. We know that during 1619 to 1808, nearly 500,000 African slaves from Africa reached North America, 500,000. After a hard sea journey in chains, with minimum of comfort, while many of their fellow slaves perished. During the period, millions of these slaves perished and millions remained in slavery all their short lives and died as slaves. Here I have for you the image of one level of one of these slave ships. And those marks that you see on the screen are actually the way slaves are organized to take maximum efficiency and minimum space for every one of them to be on a slave ship on such a hard and long journey those days. Some estimates indicate that during the age of slavery, 30 to 60 million African slaves lost their lives. Some half of these deaths happened while these unfortunate Africans were being trapped by other tribes in Africa and transported to African slave harbors for shipping to North America. Now in this picture, I show you different levels of the same slave ship. So you can see how these individuals placed there with very little comfort and very little room to move, with little water and little food. Nearly 10% of all African slaves would perish during such a difficult sea journey, while another 40% would die in their first year of exhausting labor at cotton fields of the South in America. It's an image of farming cotton in a southern state. The importing of slaves into the USA was stopped in 1808. However, slavery in the southern states continued. This conflict in 1861 resulted in the US Civil War, where the northern states who wanted an end to slavery fought a war against the southern states who wanted the continuation of slavery. The reason was economics. The slaves were regarded as the property of the southern ranch owners, state owners, to use in the cotton fields. And the North did not have that. And as a result, they did not need slave labor. And unfortunately, a very bitter civil war was fought over this subject, and some remnants of bitter feelings about it still persist. Abraham Lincoln freed all slaves of the southern states on January 1st, 1863. And 2 years later, in 1863, he signed the 13th Amendment to the US Constitution, ending slavery in the United States of America. So remember, January 1863, legally, slavery in North and South ended. In this year, there were nearly 4 million slaves in America that became free African Americans in this land. The slavery was forcefully ended by the will of the northern states and not through collective will of all. Hence, the racial prejudices against the African Americans persisted. I must say, not necessarily just in the South, everywhere. The lives and the work of African Americans were kept in check through various means, such as racial separation, lack of equal access to good education or good wage, paying work, access to loans for buying home and starting a business, and so on. There were so many various ways that were used to keep the African Americans, although free, but with no access to things that would allow them to grow and develop. African Americans could only attend educational institutions for the Blacks. They had assigned back seats in the public transportation vehicles, assigned entrances to public places such as restaurants and so on. These rules were enforced, and violators would face a range of punishments, such as lynching, burning in fire, etc., by the white extremists. Large group of African Americans in search of better lives then decided to move north from southern states, albeit most African Americans, due to continued prejudicial laws that governed the type of work and place of living and lack of access to bank loans, were disappointed. They were unable to find rewarding jobs in the North and were forced to live in ghetto type residential areas away from the white Americans and in unequal circumstances. So we can see, although slavery ended, but did not matter in North and South, racial prejudices against them were used, and numerous laws to do that, and of course, very cruel system to enforce it. African Americans, led by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., amplified their struggles in late 50s and early 60s to end racial discrimination and achieve equal legal rights. These struggles were by and large based on non-aggressive civil disobedience. But unfortunately, the assassination of Dr. King became a very sad episode for them. Slavery was legally ended, as we said, in 1865. However, the unfortunate consequences of a 200 years culture over the economy and industry and discriminative and inhumane laws could not be annulled suddenly, overnight. Those attitudes had taken deep roots on the consciousness of the nation. Even now, after 155 years from the legal end of slavery, many African Americans are still struggling for their equal rights, as some Americans in their hearts have not accepted equality for all. Some statistics may help us to get a glimpse of the problem and understand the hard road ahead for equality. I must admit that the statistics would never do justice to the severity of the problem and hardship of the African Americans. But in absence of any other way to show that, we are going to use these statistics to basically change our attitudes in case we are still holding on to some of those. We see that a Black person is 5 times more likely to be stopped without just cause than a white person, of course, by police. A Black man is twice as likely to be stopped with cause than a Black woman. 65% of Black adults have felt targeted because of their race. Similarly, approximately 35% of Latino and Asian adults have felt targeted because of their race. 84% of Black adults say white people are treated better than Black people by police. And interestingly enough, 63% of white adults agree based on 2019 research on police relations. 87% of Black adults say the US justice system is more unjust towards the Black people. And again, of interest, 61% of white adults agree to that. White people make up 60% of the population. They only make up 41% of fatal police shootings. Black people make up 13.4% of the population, but make up 22% of fatal police shootings. These statistics probably indicate the issues. 1 of every 3 Black boys born today can expect to be incarcerated compared to 1 out of 6 Latino boys or 1 out of 17 white boys. We have to think, what are the reasons behind these? 5% of illicit drug users are African Americans. So 5% of drug users are African Americans, yet they make up 29% of those arrested and 33% of those incarcerated for drug offenses. These statistics are really telling what is going on. 32% of US population is represented by African Americans and Hispanics, compared to 56% of the US incarcerated population being African American and Hispanics. Again, we see this balance of law does not seem to be a just balance. Since 1970, our incarcerated population has increased by 7 times. Now we are talking about some statistics over the past 30 years, not the past 50 or 70 years. African Americans are incarcerated at more than 5 times the rate of the whites. Since 1991, the rate of violent crimes in the United States has fallen by about 20%, while the number of people in prison has risen by 50%. Looks like we are becoming more aggressive in placing people behind bars. The imprisonment rate for African American women is twice that of white women. Children whose parents are involved in the criminal justice system suffer from varieties of illnesses, psychological strains, antisocial behavior, suspension or expulsion from school, economic hardship, and are 6 times more likely to be involved in criminal activities. So these are the consequences of placing more and more of the African American parents into prison, not thinking what's going to happen to their children. Partners of incarcerated individuals suffer from depression and economic hardship. 35% of individuals executed under the death penalty within the last 40 years have been Black. African Americans represent only 13% of the population. And we can see that 60% of juveniles sentenced to death are from African American communities. Just a look at the percentage of African Americans that make up those that are incarcerated in different states. And here I'm just showing 7 or 8 of them for you. Maryland, 72%. These show us where the problem is. Pennsylvania, 63%, Illinois, 63%, Alabama, 46%, Texas, 41%, Virginia, 39%, California, 36%, Florida, 36%, while of course the African Americans make up a very small percentage of the population. Nearly 75% of formerly incarcerated people are still unemployed a year after release. So there must be a reason why they cannot get jobs. Lack of stable employment increases the likelihood that an individual will return to jail or prison. Joblessness is the single most important predictor of recidivism, meaning going back to prison again, or being convicted again, or doing something criminal again. As of 2007, half of those incarcerated were parents of children under the age of 18. And we talked about the consequence of that over those children. Having a record reduces the chances of a job callback or offer by as much as 50%. African Americans have less wealth than whites. Less wealth translates into fewer opportunities for upward mobility and is compounded by lower income levels and fewer chances to build wealth or pass accumulated wealth to future generations. Black households, for example, have far less access to tax advantage forms of savings, due in part to long history of employment discrimination, mortgage discrimination, segregation, fewer tax benefits due to fewer income, etc. The purpose of reading these statistics for you, dear friends, is so that if we happen to be able to help the situation, do so. Next time an African American comes for a job in our office, we have to remember what that individual is fighting against. A system that has been set up to be against that individual. An individual that ends up in university and comes up with degrees must have done a miraculous job relative to others. So if we are in a position to employ them, offer them employment, we should do so. Next time we enter into an area that is mixed blacks and whites, we need to make sure the blacks are invited to our homes in the same way that the whites are. And because of this history I've been sharing with you, we have to become far more sensitive to the emotional needs of African Americans. Quite rightly, they've been hurt and they've been let down by society. And as Baha'is, it is our duty to do our utmost to compensate for that. In 2016, the median wealth for Black and Hispanic families was $17,600 and $20,700, under $20,000. But that for a white family of similar circumstance was $117,000. Median wealth for Black households with a college degree was $57,000. And about 70% of the median wealth of a white household with the same degree and the same experience. In 2007, immediately before the Great Recession, the median wealth of Blacks were nearly 14% of the whites. In 2016, Blacks still owned less than 10% of the whites. So it has come up from 14% to almost half, but it's not enough. They have a long way to go, and we have to help them in doing so. Black mothers and children die at disproportionately higher rates than their white counterparts. segregated neighborhoods with fewer hospitals, higher rates of chronic illnesses, and unequal access to health care, of course, is the main culprit for this. Racial discrimination in hiring have changed little over time. White applicants receive 36% more callback than Black applicants with similar qualifications. In recent decades, the African Americans improved their social standing, and a large portion have joined the middle class. This is where the hope is, which means more and more people in society are beginning to be sensitive and do not use those racial prejudices against the African Americans as much as we used to. Many of the discriminatory laws of the African Americans that govern bank loans for buying a house or starting a business, segregation in hotels and restaurants and public places, and place of living have all been eliminated thanks to more enlightened lawmakers. Laws prohibiting marriage of African Americans and whites are annulled. By the way, this is a strong recommendation of the Baha'i Faith to intermarry. Whites intermarry with African Americans and similarly African Americans with the whites to show in practice and in reality that there are no differences. All government agencies, universities, and educational institutes and companies are obligated now to show that they make no discrimination in their policies and actions. And those of us that work for big corporations, if we notice that they are finding ways and means of bypassing those laws, we have to speak up. International policy interventions are required. That's what is needed. To make any significant progress in closing this gap, maintaining the status quo translates into another 200 years before African Americans reach the same level as white Americans. And let's see what the Baha'i Faith says about this. The tabernacle of unity hath been raised. Baha'u'llah states, regard ye not one another as strangers, ye are the fruits of one tree and the leaves of one branch. From the writings of Abdul-Baha, we read, to be a Baha'i simply means to love all the world, to love humanity, and try to serve it, to work for universal peace and universal brotherhood. From the writings of Baha'u'llah, we read that one indeed is a man who today dedicated himself to the service of the entire human race. See, that's the key, the entire human race. In fact, the standard of being a man today, a human being, is to serve the human race. The great being saith, blessed and happy is he that arriveth to promote the best interests of the people and kindreds of the earth. From the writings of Abdul-Baha, we read that he is a true Baha'i who strives by day and by night to progress and advance along the path of human endeavor, whose most cherished desire is so to live and act to enrich and illuminate the world, whose source of inspiration is the essence of divine virtue, whose aim is in life is so to conduct himself as to the cause of infinite progress. Only when he attains unto such perfect gifts can it be said of him that he is a true Baha'i. For true faith is no mere acknowledgement of the unity of God, but rather the living of a life that will manifest all the perfections and virtues implied in such a belief. So to a Baha'i to just say, I believe in Baha'u'llah, that's not enough. He has to live by what that implies. Baha'u'llah referring to the transformation effected by every revelation in ways thoughts and manners of the people reveals these words. Is it not the object of every revelation to effect a transformation in the whole character of mankind, a transformation that shall manifest itself both outwardly and inwardly, and shall affect both its inner life and external conditions? For if the character of mankind be not changed, the futility of God's universal manifestation would be apparent. Therefore, we cannot have this argument that, well, our ancestors did it that way and it's hard to change. If we don't change, then we haven't moved forward. Among the teachings of Baha'u'llah was declaration of universal peace. People of different nations, religions, and sects who followed him came together to such an extent that remarkable gatherings were instituted consisting of various nations and religions of the East. And among the teachings of Baha'u'llah is the oneness of the world of humanity, that all human beings are the sheep of God, and he is the kind shepherd. And among the teachings of Baha'u'llah is that religion must be the cause of fellowship and love. If it becomes the cause of estrangement, then it is not needed. For religion is like a remedy. If it aggravates the disease, then it becomes unnecessary. Unfortunately, in history, we see many of the churches also promoted slavery. But it's very good to know that also many churches disapproved of it and worked to end that. Baha'u'llah said, Abdul-Baha writes, that the various races of humankind lend a composite harmony and beauty of color to the whole. Let all associate, therefore, in this great human garden, even as flowers grow and blend together side by side without discord or disagreement between them. The diversity in the human family, that I talked about it before, he claims, should be the cause of love and harmony, as it is in music, where many different notes blend together in the making of a perfect chord and melody. God maketh no distinction between the whites and the blacks. If the hearts are pure, both are acceptable to him. God is no respecter of persons on account of either color or race. In the estimation of God, there is no distinction of color. All are one in the color and beauty of servitude to him. Color is not important. The heart is all important. He looketh at the heart. He whose morals and virtues are praiseworthy is preferred in the presence of God. He who devoted to the kingdom is most beloved. And it's very noticeable and requires attention that the Baha'i Faith states that unification of mankind is dependent on the unity of whites and blacks. We read, in the world of being, the meeting is blessed when the whites and colored races, and these are, of course, African Americans and other colored people, meet together with infinite spiritual love and heavenly harmony. When such meetings are established and the participants associate with each other with perfect love, unity, and kindness, the angels of the kingdom praise them, and the beauty of Baha'u'llah addresses them, saying, "Blessed ye are, blessed, blessed are ye." On God, we read that this question of the union of the white and black is very important, for if it is not realized, ere long, great difficulties will arise and harmful results would follow. If this matter remaineth without change, enmity will be increased day by day, and the final result will be hardship and may end in bloodshed. This statement is over 100 years old, and we have seen lack of unity amongst the whites and the blacks, what it has done in certain areas. And these prejudices are only creating individuals that want justice and want it now, and quite rightly so. And therefore, we have to be instrument of providing that and bringing that about, rather than being obstacle in that path. Then we read from the writings of Abdul-Baha, strive earnestly and put forth your greatest endeavor toward the accomplishment of this fellowship and the cementing of this bond of brotherhood between you. Such an attainment is not possible without will and effort on the part of each. Love and unity will be fostered between you, thereby bringing about the oneness of mankind. For the accomplishment of unity between the colored and the white will be an assurance of the world's peace. So we can see Abdul-Baha even goes further and talks about the unity of people and the way we look at the people and bringing about justice around the world. That is the only assurance that world peace will be established. However, both sides have duties in the writings of the Baha'i Faith, and they have to do that. From the writings of Abdul-Baha, we read, a tremendous effort is required by both races if their outlook, their manners, and conduct are to reflect in this darkened age the spirit and teachings of the faith of Baha'u'llah, casting away once and for all the fallacious doctrine of racial superiority with all its attendant evil. That's number one. Racial superiority is something we have to throw away. And it's very disconcerting to hear that still large sections of the population are still thinking of racial superiority. And then says, and welcoming and encouraging the intermixture of races, which is living mixed together, marrying together, having business partners like that. This is really what we should get involved in, and tearing down the barriers that now divide them. They should each endeavor day and night to fulfill their particular responsibilities in the common task which so urgently faces them. So, dear friends, next time when your son or daughter brings in a person of a different race, African American or any other race, into the home and introduce that person to you, be open, encourage that, celebrate that. Let's have families that are global as well, because the world is becoming like that. Let the white make supreme effort in their resolve to contribute their share to the solution of this problem, to abandon once and for all their usually inherent and times subconscious sense of superiority, to correct their tendency towards revealing a patronizing attitude towards the members of the other race, to persuade them through their intimate, spontaneous, and informal association with them of the genuineness of their friendship and the sincerity of their intentions, and to master their to master their impatience of any lack of responsiveness on the part of a people who have received for so long a period such grievous and slow healing wounds. This is that sensitivity that I was referring to. For well 400 years, the African Americans have suffered, and they need to be assured of love. They need to know of sincerity of that love, and they need time to heal. It continues, let the Negroes, because when this note is written, the expression African American was not common, and the blacks are called Negroes. Let the Negroes, through a corresponding effort on their part, show by every means in their power the warmth of their response, their readiness to forget the past, and their ability to wipe out every trace of suspicion that may still linger in their hearts and minds. And I must admit, it's not easy. It's very hard. It's very hard, but without forgetting and moving forward, there can never be a solution. Let neither think that the solution of so vast a problem is a matter that exclusively concerns the others. Both sides need to work together. Is not something that can be fixed by one side. Let neither think that anything short of genuine love, extreme patience, true humility, consummate tact, sound initiative, mature wisdom, and deliberate, persistent, and prayerful effort can succeed in blotting out the stain which this present evil has left on the fair name of their common country. The image that you see is an African American and a white girl holding on to each other. And underneath this is a beautiful Persian poem. I don't have a translation of it, which says, I've never heard the most beautiful sound than that of love. Baha'u'llah and Abdul-Baha really loved the blacks. Abdul-Baha said Baha'u'llah once compared the colored people to the black pupil of the eye surrounded by the white. In this black pupil is seen the reflection of that which is before it, and through it the light of the spirit shineth. And Abdul-Baha once wrote to an African American, thou art dark in countenance and bright in character. Thou art like unto the pupil of the eye, which is dark in color, yet it is the fount of light and the revealer of the contingent world. I try to put all those eyes of different colors here. Obviously, it's not exhaustive, just some of them. But you immediately notice that regardless of which eye you look at, the pupil is always dark. And that's what Baha'u'llah refers to. In Persian, there are many passages when some refers to the son being loved or the daughter being loved, they say, "You are the light of my eye." Or if they really love someone, that they want to take care of that person, they say, "My eye and my light, I'm going to look after you," or "love you like my eyes." And that explains why Baha'u'llah and Abdul-Baha use this expression, because they are based on this understanding that the eye is the most dear to a person, and the pupil of the eye is the one that really matters because the light comes through that. And Abdul-Baha once entered a chapel in Howard University, the Rankin Chapel of Howard University, where over 1,000 people were there. This was April 23rd, 1912. And Abdul-Baha was rather tired. And he entered there. Abdul-Baha said, "Before entering this hall, I was feeling weak, but I gained strength as I observed this meeting composed of people of both races in perfect love and harmony. I hope this becomes the example of universal harmony." Dear friends, I shared with you a very small percentage of Baha'i writings on the subject. And I shared with you just a glimpse of 400 years of the plight of the African Americans. But I hope in this short presentation, you got the message that where we stand and what task we have in front of us. And of course, after this, the rest is up to us. I'm so grateful for your attention, listening to what I had to say, but I encourage every one of you to go and continue to read yourself about the plight of Africans, their hardship, their suffering, even in today's world, and work the solutions that the Baha'i Faith has offered on many levels that I refer to only a small percentage of that. I'm very grateful to you, and with this, I end my presentation.
Thank you very much for that very enlightening and informative talk. It looks as if we have about 10 minutes for questions. If anyone would like to raise their hand in the participant box or type a question in the chat box. Would anyone like to make a comment or ask Dr. Bayat a question? Okay, I see George Ballantyne has his hand up. George, would you like to ask your question?
Dear George, you are
Unmuted.
muted.
I unmuted now?
Yes, you're unmuted.
Okay, thanks. How wonderful to see you, Ghasem, after all these years. I should say that I had the bounty, and you know, it's hard to find a word to describe how wonderful it was to share in firesides at Ghasem and Sateh's home when they lived in a small town called Bearsden, just outside of Glasgow in Scotland.
35 years ago. 25
years ago.
35 years ago.
35, oh my goodness. Well, you can tell, look, there's nothing up here. It's all down here now. It was a wonderful presentation, as erudite and thoroughly researched as I remember. I'm really thrilled to be speaking to you, actually. It's wonderful. I wanted to ask that, of course, friends all across the world have been looking at the situation in the United States in the past few years. And we know that Shoghi Effendi called this, you know, the most pressing, the most urgent issue that faces the American Baha'i community. Every country has its own forms of racial discrimination or discrimination based on other distinguishing characteristics that we don't share with people. How do you feel about what the friends in other parts of the world, and I'm speaking from England, we're from the UK, what can we do to be of assistance to our friends in the United States to help, not to so much to work on our race issues, but to help you with yours?
Dear George, you really touched the heart of the subject, that it is these discriminations of various forms of it persist everywhere in the world. The addresses of the beloved Guardian, as well as Abdul-Baha in the course of his trips and many tablets before and after that, was specifically on the issue of African Americans and whites. And of course, a lot has happened since then. As I was in my brief survey saying, most of the laws have been removed and most of the excuses that people had to say it's not my fault, that's what the law is, they've been reviewed. What is now left is something universal, which has to do with human heart now. The human heart is now responsible for the continuation of those racial prejudices. And therefore, what is left now is universal in the world. The same sympathy that African Americans now need from whites, for whites to fix themselves. It's not what African Americans need, for whites to progress beyond where they are and become better human beings is to give up those prejudices. And this is exactly what people of the rest of the world also need towards their own prejudices. As a Persian, I'm very conscious of prejudices, for example, against Baha'is. And that's not on the account of race, but it's on the account of religion. As you see, these are all matters of conscience. In parts of the world is political, in parts of the world is religious, parts of the world to do with ethnicity. And in this continent, we have it in America, North America. It's not a country, it's a continent. We have it as prejudice. So we have to change our hearts. And the rest of the world, if they see that, they're going to follow our lead. And I'm hoping that that will be the case. Thank you, George.
Thank you, Ghasem.
Okay, we have Roya Rahimpur has her hand up. Could you unmute yourself and ask your question, Roya?
Thank you very much. Allahu Akbar to everybody, and thank you for everybody who organized this. Thank you, Dr. Bayat. I have been very devoted follower and listening to you, and I really enjoy the 12 o'clock Sundays that you have program with Mr. Nasser Shahinpar. That was wonderful, especially for Iranian speaking and Iranian background. So thank you so much. I just wanted to ask a question in regards to same subject of racial discrimination. Sometimes there is inhibition, at least in myself, to bring this up because sometimes it can conflict with the teaching that we have in regards to not to basically interfere with political issues. So how do we separate this issue of race from a political issue, and how do we approach it to not to tickle the other parts that we are not supposed to do? Thank you so much.
Very good. Dear friends, those who are Baha'is are very conscious that as Baha'is, we are asked to be apolitical and non-partisan. Really, the issue is not being partisan. But things that we were talking about has nothing to do with being partisan or not. These are matters of conscience. And as I said, I see the flaw in us that we have to fix ourselves, our own ideas about the world and people. I think it's a change of attitude that we need to make in ourselves. And of course, as a result of that our bad attitudes, African Americans have been the recipient of all the atrocities. And if we change ourselves, they will be the one who receive the benefits of it. So I will not make this an African American problem. I really see this as a problem of attitude of those who look at the world with a racial prejudices pair of glasses. So we just need to remove that. That has nothing to do with partisan politics. I'm conscious that there are some parties who promote racial superiority, and people of the world know that they are wrong. And as Baha'is, we know they are wrong. And the part that we challenge them is only the part that has to do with the conscience, not with their party. Thank you.
There's a question in the chat box asking for concrete examples that the individuals and communities can do to tackle racism within their communities.
First of all, it's a personal thing at one level. As I said, your son or daughter brings a person of a different race into the house, and you could be of any race yourself. If you instantly shower your son or daughter with love and say, what a wonderful thing that you're able to rise above what humanity for thousands of years have been unable to do, that would be a great start. If they want to get married, that's a wonderful thing to support them. I've heard people say, well, cultures don't match, therefore the more likelihood of a breakup. Well, look at the statistics of divorce in the United States. It has nothing to do with those things. We've just lost our way of knowing what a marriage is about. It has nothing to do with cultures. And I'm pretty sure that aspect of the difference in culture of different race is not going to add any more to that problem. At work, we have to have the right attitude, treat all of our staff and our superiors in exactly the same way. In our neighborhood, we need to be exactly the same. Our home should be open to everyone. And those who have racial prejudices, by coming and seeing that your home is a home of love, they are going to learn from that. In the neighborhood, your friends show who you are, because the world is a multicultural world, multiracial world. If our friends look like that, then we are, if you like, a symbol of the world. If in our parties that we give, we invite everyone of different race and different cultures there. So as you see, I'm giving some very simple, concrete examples, and the rest, the friends can work it out for themselves. I apologize. And this is as long as I could stay with you. I have to rush to a different engagement that I have. I'm grateful for all those who participated in this program, stayed with us, and those who later on see the links and see this view, but emphasize what I presented was a drop in the ocean of all aspects that I covered. Please go and enlighten yourselves, educate yourselves, and I'm pretty sure you will be a better presenter next time the opportunity comes. Thank you very much to all of you. God bless you all.
Thank you, Dr. Bayat. We will now have our closing prayer.
Oh my God, unite the hearts of thy servants and reveal to them thy great purpose. May they fall Help them, oh God, in their endeavor. And grant them strength to serve thee. Oh God, leave them not to themselves. Oh no, but guide their steps by the light of thy knowledge, and cheer their hearts, and cheer their hearts. Make them happy, Lord, and cheer their hearts by thy verily, thou art their helper and their Lord.
Thank you, everyone. We hope to see you again next week when Dr. Bayat will continue his discussion. Thank you.